So, about this whole question of who's going to be the Joe Rogan of the left, I think it's the wrong question. I think we should be asking who's going to be the Steve Bannon of the left. I just don't think we'll get anywhere by micromanaging the manosphere podcast space so that we can nudge the bros back from gender essentialism and supplements. Those are symptoms. And maybe you want to focus on symptoms if you want to avoid figuring out what it takes to be as ruthless as Steve Bannon. But the irony is, he learned what he learned from the revolutionary left, specifically from Lenin. Yeah, he's a fascist ghoul, but he has appropriated a key piece of leftist technique out from under our noses. And I'm not talking about his BS economic populism. I'm talking about having a working theory for seizing power during a crisis of capitalism that breaks all the rules, because that's what he's engineered MAGA to do. Now, I'm not making up the Lenin thing. In 2013, he actually told a Daily Beast writer straight up that he is a Leninist. And then he said, quote, Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment. Then in 2016, he goes to CPAC and says this on stage.
The third, broadly, line of work is what is deconstruction of the administrative state.
Now, these two statements are in kind of a shorthand because deconstructing the state is less than half of the Lenin program, which is why Bannon is now talking about Trump needing a third term to fully accomplish what? Here he is in 2024 describing his revolutionary vanguard.
Organizations, Center for Renewing America, all these different organizations that are conservative or on MAGA are training tens of thousands. 3,000 will be the first wave that hits that will really staff the Trump government at every level, from Department of Energy, Department of Defense. Every billet that needs to be filled will be filled pretty quickly in the second term.
So that's Project 2025. And yeah, it's helpful to read through the document, to understand things like unitary executive theory, and to scan for all the fascist ideology and scapegoating. But beyond all the content, what Bannon and Kevin Roberts and Paul Danza are telling you, dear leftist, is that the willingness to plan and agitate for revolution, something that's at the heart of your heritage, to go beyond permitted demonstrations or hoping that the liberals will save you, this is an idea that you've now largely given up on, and it's now theirs. So what has Bannon picked up on? What did Lenin prescribe in What Is to Be Done back in 1902? He said that to overthrow the capitalist state, you must form a core group of disciplined professional revolutionaries, guided by and spreading the most advanced theory, ready to lead the masses to not only strike, but to hold power. And isn't this what MAGA has done down to the letter? Like, why are so many of us baffled? Why did this knowledge slip out of our hands? I mean, for one thing, party-level left-wing organizing has been repressed for almost 80 years now. That's 4 generations. This is at the heart of this great book called They Will Beat the Memory Out of Us by Peter Gelderloos. And by the late 1960s, real and perceived failures of state communist projects drove the new left to be reasonably suspicious of vanguardism and to emphasize personal and psychological liberation through spontaneous and horizontal expressions of freedom that were prefigurative, meaning the idea that you're acting as though the state is already irrelevant. The problem is that capitalism can easily manage or even commodify spontaneous uprisings. And so spontaneity doesn't really stop its onward march toward the climate cliff. In If We Burn, the mass protest decade and the missing revolution from 2023, Vincent Bevins takes the pulse of how the spontaneous, decentralized, social media advertised, un-Lenin-like and un-Bannon-like mass protest movements around the world from 2010 to 2020 didn't yield sustained structural changes, and in many cases led to reactionary backlash as fascists learned to capture and redirect popular rage. In the background of Bevins's story is the echo of Occupy, where the late beloved anthropologist and anarchist David Graeber stands as a foil to Bannon today, insisting that the means and ends of political change must be unified. Like all good anarchists, Graeber says that you can't tell people how to revolt, but that by demonstrating horizontal, collective, and consensus-based encampments and teach-ins, you might exude a contagious experience of freedom that might convince the masses to quiet quit the state and form their own social and mutual aid networks. Now, this is not a knock on Graeber, whose writing is really precious to me, especially his writing on everyday communism. I hope we see a long line of inheritors of his work, and of course, Occupy modeled wonderful practices. And I think we have to be honest that if Graeber and Bannon are now like ideological archetypes for theories of change, one is a saint and one is a jackal. And the question is this the time of saints or is it the time of jackals? There might be a plot twist because Bannon told Politico recently that Mamdani is a serious threat to MAGA. But I think he might actually just be warning his team to keep the pressure up, because I bet if you asked him directly, Bannon would say that Mamdani has spontaneity and strategy and ideological gravitas, but that there's no vanguard standing behind him. That the Democratic Party, even if it did support him, isn't going to let the state be challenged, because it is the state. And challenging the state is what a Steve Bannon on the left would be figuring out, while the Joe Rogan of the left would just be interviewing Gavin Newsom about stuff.